In this example, we're going to show you how to model the lily leaf moulding from the vectors that we created in the previous vector drawing session for this set of tutorials. We're then going to look at how we can assemble the part to create the full 48-inch moulding, and then finally take that a stage further, whereby we're going to look at how we can distort the moulding along an arc to create the arch that you can see here. So let's just go to File, Close. So let's go and open up an existing file. So from the project folder, we're going to open the lily leaf moulding vector drawing, press open. So these are the vectors that we left off with in the previous vector drawing session. Now before we go ahead and start to create any components, I just want to take a moment just to review my resolution along the appearance. So let's go into Set Job Dimensions and Origin. Here we can currently see the modelling resolution is at its standard. I just want to up that to high just to optimise the resolution there. And then for the appearance, we're going to make that Canadian maple. Press OK. So now let's tile our windows horizontally, that way we can see the 2D view at the top and we can see the 3D view at the bottom. Now if you've watched the previous tutorial to this example, you'll know that when we created these vectors, we created them in a way that we're going to use them for specific tools. For example, for the actual base shape of the moulding, we're going to look using this vector here with this vector here, whereby we're going to use a 2-rail sweep to sweep this cross section between the two rails that we have at the top and bottom. So let's go into the Modelling tab. And so before I go ahead and create any components, what I'd like to do is just begin by getting into the swing of organising my component tree. For example, we're always defaulted to level 1 here. I'm just going to right click on that, rename that level to something more appropriate to what I'm going to create. In this case, we're going to call this level the base level. And now I'm ready to create any components. Any components that I do create will be added to this base level. So to create a 2-rail sweep, let's go over to the 2-rail sweep form. So now I need to look at selecting our drive rails. As I said, we're going to use this vector here, shift and select the bottom vector there, use the option, use selection. It's now changed those vectors into drive rails. I can see both of the start points on the left side of each of those rails, and the arrows for both of the rails are pointing in the same direction. So now what I need to do is I need to apply my cross section, which is this vector here, and it's this vector that we're going to sweep between the two rails going from left to right. I'm just going to uncheck all of these options here, and we'll give that a name. We're going to call this component Basic Moulding. Press apply and you'll see it's created that shape based on my cross section and the two rails. We can see how that looks there in the 3D view. So let's just put that back in Z, and then we could just close that form down. So now what I'd like to do is look at modelling in the leaf and the stem. So as we're working with a new part of our design, what I'd like to do is just create a new level for those components. So I'm just going to minimise the base level. I'm going to right click on the base level and use the option Insert New Level. Then we're just going to switch the base level off, right click on level 1, rename that level, and we're going to call this level Leaf and Stem. And any components that I create now will be added to this level because it's now the active level. So we're going to start by looking at modelling in the leaf shapes using the Create Shape tool. So to do that, I'm going to select one of these shapes here. So we're going to look at this side of the leaf, come over to the modelling tools, and then we're going to use the Create Shape from Vector Outlines tool. So here we need to specify a profile. As we're working with a natural form, we're going to go the curved profile here. Then we need to specify an angle. In this case, we're going to go 65 degrees. I'm going to set my final height here to an exact height of 0.15. I'm going to give that a name. We're going to call this one Leaf 1. set the combine mode of that to merge, press apply, and we can see how that looks. Okay, so I like the shape that we have there. Put that back in Z, and then we'll just go ahead and start a new component. So now we're going to look at creating the shape for the inner part of our leaf here, represented by this vector. So with that vector selected, we're going to go with the round profile again. This time we're just going to knock the angle down to around 50 degrees. I'm going to scale that to an exact height of 0.1, and then we're going to go ahead, give that a name. We're going to call this one inner leaf. Press apply. You can see it's currently set to merge. Now in this case, what I'd like to do is set the combine mode of this component to subtract into the leaf that we already had created. So if we do that, you'll see there it's done that, and we've got more of what I was actually looking for, so we can see that shape there. So again, let's go ahead and start a new component, and then we're going to select this leaf shape here. I'm going to go back to the settings we used for the first leaf, so we're going to go with an angle of 65 degrees, scale to an exact height of 0.15, and set the combine mode of that to merge, and then we'll give that a name. We're going to call this one leaf 2, press apply. You can see how that looks there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Let's just put that back in Z, and then we can close the create shape form down as we're done using this tool here. So now we're ready to model in the stem. Now when we drew the vectors, we did so in a way that we were conscious of how we were going to model the parts in the end. And so when we created the stem, you'll see that we've got one vector that just goes from the centre round into the tip of the leaf here. And the reason that we have one vector is because we intend to use the extrude tool, whereby we're going to extrude these cross sections along this line. So let's go into the extrude tool to see how this works. Now, as we already have our vector selected, we're just going to use the option here, use selection, and that's changed that vector into a drive rail. So all we need to do now is apply a cross section. So in the cross section of the form, we can use the option to use vector cross sections, which is what I'm going to do in this case. Now you'll remember when we created the vectors for the vector drawing session, we did so in a way that we're going to use two cross sections, whereby we're going to have the larger cross section at the centre, and then ultimately sweep into the smaller cross section that we have here. So to do that, I'm going to select the cross section, hover over the start point here. You'll see I've got a check there. It's telling me that I'm able to apply that there, and you'll see it's now applied that, and it's going to go all the way through using this cross section here. As I said, I'd like the end point of our stem to have a much smaller cross section, so in which case I'm going to select that smaller cross section there and apply that to the tip there. So let's just press apply just to see how that looks. And so we can see it doesn't look too bad. We can see the larger cross section where it begins over here, and then as it comes into the tip of that stem, we're now presented with that smaller cross section. So we've got a nice natural blend of shapes there. One thing I would like to do is just alter the curvature to the bottom part of this stem here, just so that it flows into the leaf a little better. So to do that, simply click into the white space in the 2D view and then press N on the keyboard. That's going to put that into node edit mode. And then here you can see that I can simply just alter the shape of the vector that we have there. Just making subtle changes there, just making it a little bit more rounded at the bottom, so when I press apply we can see how that looks. So just these little subtle movements make all the difference. And one other change that I'd like to add, and that's the actual thickness of the cross section for our stem. Now we can see, looking at the cross section that we already have, we've got the larger cross section coming in to the smaller cross section, which is this one here, and I feel that it's coming in too thin too quickly. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at adding in another large cross section somewhere around here just to maintain the thickness of the stem. So to do that, I can simply click on the cross section, and then what we could do is we could just simply click into position where we'd like to add that in, press apply, and we can see how that looks there. And so we can see that we're maintaining the thickness of the stem there. Then as it reaches the tip of the stem, we've got a much smaller cross section. So let's just zoom in to the tip of the leaf there. So you can see it's actually overhanging here. So what I might want to do is just look at altering the shape of the vector. So I'm just going to click into the white space here. Just going to zoom in a little, and I'm going to press N on the keyboard to go into node edit mode. I'm going to take that and I'm just going to nudge that in like so, and then we could go ahead, press apply to see how that looks. So you can see it's now in the actual leaf itself. So let's just put that in Z, and I'll click in the white space here and zoom to fit on there. Next thing we want to do is we want to just set the combine mode of our stem to merge, so it's blending in, and then I may just want to apply a final height. So we're going to use the option here, scale to an exact height, 0.15, press apply, and then we'll give that a name. We'll call this component stem, press apply, and then we can close that down. So now what I'd like to do is create a copy of the components that we've just created here, and look at creating a smaller version of our stem and leaf that's going to sit somewhere around here. So to do that, I'm going to select the stem component, hold down Shift and select leaf 1. That will enable me to select all of these components there. In the 2D view, click on the selection to put it into transform mode, hold down Control on the keyboard to create my copy, hold down Shift in order for me to size this in proportion about the centre, and you'll see when I let go we've created a copy. I can see all my new components there, and we've got our new selection here. So here I can just look at rotating that around, and then I could just move this over somewhere around here. Again, I could just look at rotating that again and just moving that. Look at the size here, bring that down, rotate that, and just move and size the part around until we're happy with the layout that we have. I just want to do one more rotation there, and just a final nudge over to the left, and I think that looks okay. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a mirrored copy of all of the components that we have here over to the right hand side. But before we do that, I need to look at removing this overhang of the stalk where it goes into the right hand side. I don't want that in our composition. So what I need to do is draw a vector around the area that I want to remove, and then we could simply use the cropping tool to clear everything inside of that vector. So let's maximise the 2D view, use the option here to zoom to fit. I'm going to go into the drawing tab, and we're going to use the Polyline tool. I'm just going to turn off geometry snapping. I don't need that on in this case. I'm only simply sketching in a rough shape that's going to go around the areas that I don't want. I'm just going to press tab to close that off. I can close that down. Let's tile our windows horizontally, select the stem component, shift and select the vector that we're going to crop it to, into the modelling tab, clear everything inside, and you'll see it's removed everything inside there. And I can take that vector and we can just look at deleting it. So now what we can do is we can look at creating our mirrored copy on the other side. So I'm just going to take stem, the duplicate there, shift and select leaf 1, so everything's selected here, right mouse click, and I'm just going to group them, and I'm going to right mouse click and rename that group, and we're going to call this one left leaf group. And then we're going to take that leaf group and we're going to look at creating that copy. So if that's selected, let's go over to mirror selected objects. I'm going to flip that about the job centre. We're also going to create a mirrored copy, and we're going to go ahead and flip that horizontally. Okay, so there's my copy flipped over job centre horizontally. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to undraw create a mirrored copy, still have flip about job centre selected, and we're going to use the option here to flip vertically. And so you'll see that we've got a nice transition going through the centre point there. If we close that down, now you remember that when we actually created the vectors in the vector drawing session, we created this vector in a way that if I just go into node edit mode, we made sure that the control handles over to the right hand side in order for us to create that seamless transition through the two parts when we ultimately mirror them, and we can see that in our 3D preview here. So let's go over to the left group over here, the copy, and we're just going to right click, we're going to rename that, and we're just going to call this one right leaf group. So let's switch on the base level and take a look at the part that we have so far. Okay, so you can see we've got some interesting results here, and what we're seeing here is the creases of the moulding transmitting through to our leaf and stem groups. And the reason for that is quite simply that our leaf groups are sat in a level that's currently adding on top of the base level. So that's why we're seeing the creases coming through there, because the two are adding on top of each other. Now, to create a nice smooth transition where the leaf groups sat smoothly on top of the moulding without these creases transmitting through to the leaf groups, what we need to do is create a smooth underlying shape that we would ultimately crop to and then merge with the base level, and so that it can sit nicely on top without us being able to see the creases that are actually coming through there. And so to do that, we're going to create a smooth underlying shape based loosely on the original shape of the cross section that we have here. So let's just maximise the 2D view, use the option here to zoom to fit. We're actually going to go into normal selection mode here. I'm just going to select that vector, and we're going to use the option here to zoom active view to selected objects. And then I'm going to also switch on geometry snapping to help me draw up this underlying shape. So let's go into the drawing tab. I'm going to go into draw a polyline. I'm just going to snap to that point there, to this point here, and to this point here, and then to the end point over there. Right mouse click to come out. I'm going to go into node edit mode by coming onto this icon over here, right click on this span, turn that into a Bezier span, and then we're just going to alter the handles just to alter the overall shape of the part, so we get a nice smooth shape that loosely follows the original shape but without the actual creases there. We'll take this handle, put that down over there, and I'm going to right click about this point here and use the option to insert a point, and then we're just going to nudge that in ever so slightly like that. If we just zoom down here, I'm going to take this handle, using my right arrow key, nudge that over to the right, and then come up to the top over here. Again, take that handle, nudge it over to the right, and you'll see we've got a nice smooth vector that just loosely follows the original shape. So let's just use the option here to zoom to fit. So now we can look at creating that smooth underlying shape. So let's go and tile our windows horizontally, and then we'll go into the modelling tab. I'm going to switch off the base level, and now as I'm working with a new element of the design, we're going to insert a new level. So right click on leaf and stem, insert a new level, right click on level 1, rename that level. We're going to call this one smooth shape. Now what I'd like to do is create a copy of the components that we can see here. So to do that, we're going to use this option here, create component from visible model. It will create a component based on what we can see in the 3D view here. So when I do that, it's going to add that to my active level, which is the smooth shape. So now I can switch off the original leaf and stem shape. You'll see I now have one component that represents everything that we saw there in the 3D view. So let's just minimise this level here. And now we can go and create the 2-rail sweep. So I'm going to go into the 2-rail sweep form, select this vector here, shift and select this vector here. So use selection, select our newly created smooth underlying shape there. And then we're just going to go in, give that a name, call that smooth UL for underlying, and then shape. Press apply. Okay, so you can see that shape there, so you can see how smooth the transition is here. Then we could go ahead and just close that down. And so now if I switch on the base level, you'll see that those creases are still transmitting through, and we've also increased the height there, and that's because this smooth level is still currently set to add. So we need to change the combine mode of this so it's merging into the base level. So to do that, let's right mouse click, combine mode, set that to merge. And so we can see that this new shape is completely covering the original base shape there. So what we need to do is we need to look at cropping this newly created underlying shape to the exact shape of our leaf components here. So to do that, we simply take that smooth underlying shape, hold down Control. I'm going to select the copy of the visible model, as that's the shape that I'd like to crop our component to. Then we're going to come over here to clear area of selected component outside, in this case, the selected component that we had selected last. And so now we can see, if we take a look in the Z view there, that the creases are no longer being transmitted through, and that's all down to the smooth underlying shape that we created. So if we just switch these components off here, just take a look at how we created this. So put this in the ISO view. So we started off with our base shape using the 2-rail sweep, whereby we use this cross section, sweep that between the 2 rails to create this shape that you can see here. And we did that with the intention of applying the leaf decoration on top of this base or moulding shape. Now in order for that to work correctly without the creases of the moulding coming through to those leaves, we've had to look at adding in another underlying shape. And so we drew this vector here, again based loosely on the original shape. You'll see it's a nice smooth shape, we don't have these creases in, but it loosely follows the original shape as close as we can. And so with that vector we created a smooth underlying shape, which is this component here. And obviously we've looked at cropping this component to the shape of our leaf model that we had there. And so you can see how that's blending in because the level is currently set to merge in with the base level. So you can see it's blending in to the original moulding shape that we have. And then all we've done is we've just simply added the leaf component on top, and you can see it's just sat smoothly on top there without those creases. So let's just put that back in Z. So now we're going to look at creating a full-length moulding using the components that we've already created. So let's just organise our part. So if we go to Edit, Selection, select all vectors, you'll see that all the vectors are selected, and then we're going to right click on any one of those vectors and use the option here to move to Layer, New Layer. We're going to call this layer Vectors. We're going to make that invisible, inactive, press OK. I don't need those vectors anymore, so we're just going to move them onto an invisible layer. And then layer 1, which is the currently active layer, we're going to change the name of that to components, as this layer has our components on. So to create that full length moulding, we need to go into our job setup to change the size. So let's go into the drawing tab, into the job setup form. And so we're going to change our XY datum position from the center to the lower left. So let's go to the lower left option there. Then we're going to change the width of that, so it's 48 inches wide. Height's going to remain the same. Resolution, let's just up the resolution to very high so that we have more pixels to play with, and we could go ahead and press OK. So now that we've increased the job size to be 48 inches wide, we can now look at creating a linear array of the components that we already have. Now we know that this moulding here is 12 inches wide, so we know that we could fit 4 copies within this 48 inch wide job space. So let's go into the modelling tab. We're going to select the basic moulding. I'm going to hold down Control and we're going to pick out the copy of the visible model, smooth underlined shape, and I'm going to come over and we're going to use the array copy, create a linear array of copies. And so in the array copy form we've got various options that we can use to create our array. So here for the rows we're going to put 1 in there, we're only working with 1 row, and for the columns, as we said earlier, we're going to have 4 copies in there that will fit in that 48 inch wide space. Spacing, we can specify a gap distance or an offset distance. In this case we're actually going to go with an offset distance of 12 inches, so that's the size of the part that we're actually copying. So I'm going to put 12 in X, 0 for Y, and then we're going to go ahead and just press copy. Okay, so we can see we've got that copy there, and if we just click into the space so the components are deselected, we can better see how that looks. Okay, so that looks good. However, what I'd like to do is every other leaf that we have in this design, I'd like them to be flipped horizontally so that we can alternate the pattern that we've got there. So to do that, let's just come out of the form. I'm going to go to Edit and we're just going to undo that array copy there. I'm going to create a new level, so I'm going to right click on the smooth shape level, insert a new level, rename that level. We're going to call this one alternate array. We're going to set the combine mode of this level to merge. I'm just going to switch off the base level for the time being. So we're going to take these two shapes. What I'd like to do is just create one component that represents the two shapes. So to do that, we're simply going to use this option here to create component from visible model. And when I click that, it will be added to the new level that we've created. As that level is bold, it is the active level. And that's why it's gone into that level. So now we can switch off the smooth shape and we could just minimize that level there. Let's just put that in Z. So creating the copy of the visible model based on the components that are in the smooth shape will allow me to just select this component alone when we come to creating the alternate flip when we do that array. So let's just select the base level, and we're actually going to select the basic moulding. I'm going to come back over to Array Objects. I'm going to go with the exact same settings in here, go ahead and press copy, and you'll see there we've created our nice seamless moulding base there. So I'm just going to click into the area here so that I can then go in and select this copy of the visible model, which is the actual leaf detail. And so with that component selected, we're going to go with pretty much the same settings that we've got in here, except we're just going to make one minor adjustment, and that's to the symmetry. Now, as I said, I want to create copies of this leaf, but so that every other leaf that we create is actually flipped horizontally, so it's almost mirrored against the one before it. And so to do that, we can look at altering the symmetry. Now you'll see that we've got these L-shaped buttons here. Now we're only working with one row, so we're only concerned with the bottom two here. And this L shape indicates the layout that will be used relative to my leaf design's original orientation. And so this is going to remain the same for this box here. But when we come to create the next component, I want that to be a mirrored version of what we can see here. So I just simply click to find the mirrored layout, which is this one here. So you can see, looking at the L shapes there, we have a mirrored version. So when I create that copy, we're going to have flipped alternate components. So when we go ahead and press copy, I can see that I've got my first original component, which is represented by this symmetry button here. My next one is a flipped version, and we can see there just by looking at the components, it's a flipped mirrored version of the component previous, which is indicated by this button here. And then next in the line, we're going back to this shape here, and then it gets flipped again. So let's just go ahead and press close there. And so I like what we have there, and we could take this a stage further whereby we could look at distorting that composite model around an arch. So to do that, let's just go and insert a new level. So I'm going to go and insert a new level, rename that level. We're going to call this level arch. And then here what I'm going to do is we're going to look at creating a component based on all of the components that we've just created there. So let's just use that option. So there's my new component. Let's just switch the alternate array level off, switch off the base level. Let's just minimize those. So we're just left with the copy of the visible model, which is our entire alternate array molding. So to create this arch, I'm just going to alter the size of our job. So let's go into the drawing tab, into job setup, and then for the width of the part, we're going to make that 40 inches, and we're going to make the height of this 20. I could just go ahead now and press OK. This is my new job setup. And the next thing that I'd like to do now is draw my arc, which will ultimately act as a vector, which we will distort this moulding around to create that arch shape. So to draw an arc, we're going to come over to the Draw Arc option, and we're going to create this arc by using Center, Start and End. I'm going to specify particular values to input here. So we're going to put our start point in X is going to be 6 in X, 1 in Y, and then our end point is going to be 34 in X, and again we're going to go with 1 in Y, and then we need to specify a radius. So in this case we're going to go with a radius of 14, and we can create that, and then I can close that down. So as I said, this vector that we've created represents the inside edge of the arch that we're going to create. And we created that arc, we set a radius of 14 inches, so we know that we've got a diameter of 28 inches. We also know the width of our moulding is 4 inches, and so in total we'd have an outer diameter of 36 inches. Now we want to distort this moulding around the curve of this vector here, and so to minimise the part being stretched, we're going to look at sizing the moulding so it's correct in length. So we're going to take that component, we're going to go over to Set Selected Object Size. So as I said, we're going to have an outer diameter of 36 inches. Our moulding is 4 inches high. We're going to have an inner diameter of 28 inches, and so that means that the median diameter between the inside and the outside edge is going to be 32 inches, and this is the value that we're going to use to scale our moulding. So let's come over to the form. I'm going to make sure that link XY is unchecked, as it's only the width that we're changing here, and we're changing the width so it's the same as the length of our arc. So to work out the circumference of a circle, we're going to use the formula pi times the diameter. And the diameter in this case is going to be 32, that median value between the inner diameter of 28, the outer diameter of 36. So we're going to go with pi times the diameter, which is 32, and as we're only working with half a circle, we also need to divide that by 2 to get the half. So let's come over to the width box over here, and we can do all of this as a calculation in this box here. So to do that, we're going to type in P for pi, then we're going to use the asterisk, which is times, and then we're going to put in our diameter. In this case we know that's 32, that median value, and then we're going to put slash for divide, 2 to divide it by 2 to get the half circle, simply press equals, and that is the width of my part that I want. And then we could go ahead, press apply, and you'll see it hasn't distorted it too much, and we've got our new component that should fit perfectly along the arc of this vector here. So let's just close that down. So now that we know the component's width matches the length of the arc, we can now go and distort that. So if that component's selected, we're going to hold down Shift and we're going to select the arc. I'm going to come over to Transform Objects and use the Distort tool. So here we can have the option to distort above a single curve, and that's what we're going to use. You can see we've got a check mark there. It's telling us that we're okay to do that, and we could just simply go ahead and press apply. And there we have our arch moulding. So let's close that form down, maximise the 3D view just to take a look at what we've got there. And so that completes this tutorial where we've looked at various ways to model the individual components and then took it a stage further by looking at how we can assemble the part into a full 48-inch moulding, and then finally finish that off by creating this arch that you can see here. So let's go and save this project. So in the project folder we're going to call this one Lily Leaf Molding 3D Modelling, and you can access that from the project folder.